Storm was supposed to take everything, but instead, it brought them together. A war veteran hiding from his past, a wounded nurse running for her life, and a loyal German shepherd who refused to leave them behind. In the heart of the blizzard, they found something stronger than fear: faith, courage, and the hand of God. If you believe that miracles still find us, even in the darkest storms, subscribe now, leave an all men below, and share this story to remind the world. Sometimes the wind came first, low and distant, then rising like a scream torn from the throat of the mountains. Snow hurled itself against the pines, cloaking the valley in a restless white void. In that storm, sound itself seemed to vanish, except for the dull, rhythmic crack of ice shifting on the frozen creek below. Inside a small wooden cabin, Jack Miller sat by the fire, his silhouette carved sharp against the glow. He was a man built of straight lines and quiet endurance, broad-shouldered, 6 feet tall, with the lean frame of someone who had known both hunger and discipline. His face bore the wear of 45 winters and wars, its edges marked by a short salt and pepper beard. Deep lines framed his eyes the color of storm clouds, eyes that had once seen the dust and fire of Afghanistan. Jack had been home for 7 years, though home was a fragile word. He had returned to find his wife gone, taken by illness while he was overseas, and the world that remained felt small, artificial. So he came here to Montana's wild north, to let silence stitch him back together. His only company now was Ranger, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat that shimmered bronze under the firelight. Ranger had served beside Jack in his last tour, a bomb detection K9 with nerves of iron and eyes that watched every flicker of movement as if reading intent itself. Jack reached down, running a rough hand through the dog's thick fur. "Easy, boy," he muttered. The wind clawed at the cabin walls, and the chimney howled like some old ghost. He told himself the storm would pass, that it was just another night. But storms like this could erase things, tracks, lives, entire roads, without leaving a trace. He rose, crossing to the window. Outside, the world had dissolved into white, the spruce trees bent under the gale, their shapes twisted and ghostly. His breath fogged the glass, and for a moment he saw not his reflection, but the faint outline of a younger man, uniformed and steady, the soldier he used to be. The memory felt distant, cruelly so. Behind him, Ranger stirred. The dog's ears pricked, head turning sharply toward the door. A low growl vibrated in his chest, steady, measured, certain. Jack froze. He knew that sound. It wasn't fear, it was alert. "What is it?" he asked softly. Ranger moved to the door, nose pressed against the seam, inhaling deeply. Then came a single bark, sharp as a rifle crack. Jack's pulse quickened. No one should be out there. The nearest town was 12 miles away, and the access road had vanished under 4 feet of snow days ago. He grabbed his parka from the hook by the door, a thick canvas coat faded from years of use, and pulled it on over a wool sweater. The motion felt automatic, muscle memory from too many deployments. Assess, prepare, move. He slung a flashlight and his old hunting rifle over his shoulder, checking the chamber more out of habit than need. "Stay close," he said. Ranger wagged once, a soldier acknowledging an order. When Jack opened the door, the storm roared to life, biting into his face with shards of ice. Snow drove sideways, stealing sight and breath. He stepped into it anyway. Ranger led, carving a path through the drifts, his body low, tail stiff with purpose. The beam of Jack's flashlight cut short, swallowed by the white. They moved downhill, the wind pushing hard against them. The cold was merciless, seeping through gloves and into bone. Jack's mind, trained to assess threats, noted every sound, the creak of bending wood, the muted thump of falling snow. But underneath it all came something else, a faint, rhythmic metallic clatter, out of place, almost human. Ranger stopped. The dog's body tensed, then gave a sharp bark toward the ravine. Jack followed his gaze and pointed the flashlight downward. At first he saw only snow and shadow. Then the light caught a shape, dark, angular, half buried under ice. A truck. Jack's stomach dropped. The vehicle lay twisted at the bottom of the embankment, nose down in the drift. The windshield was shattered, the hood crumpled like paper. He slid down the slope, using his boots to brake against the loose snow, Ranger leaping beside him with a low whine. The closer he got, the more wrong it looked. The engine was still ticking faintly, metal cooling. This wasn't abandoned, it was recent. He peered inside, brushing away a film of frost from the driver's window. Someone was in there. Jack smashed the remaining glass with the butt of his rifle and reached in. A woman, slumped over the wheel, motionless. Her hair was dark blonde, tangled with blood. Her coat, pale blue once, was torn and stiff with ice. He touched her neck with gloved fingers. A pulse, weak but there. "Hang on," he murmured. "You're not done yet." He unbuckled her seatbelt, half lifting her through the broken window. She couldn't have been more than 30. Her face was pale, lashes iced over, lips blue. There was something about her, fragile but not helpless, like someone used to caring for others and utterly unprepared to be the one who needed saving. Jack looked around the cab. A medical bag lay torn open in the passenger seat, scattered with gauze and syringes. The name tag on her jacket read, Emma Carter. A nurse, maybe, or a medic. He hoisted her onto his back, feeling the sudden weight of both her and responsibility. Ranger barked, circling anxiously. "Lead the way, boy!" Jack shouted over the storm. The climb back was hell. The wind clawed at him, dragging him sideways. Each step up the ravine was a war against the cold, against exhaustion, against the old ghosts whispering in his head. Ghosts of sandstorms and comrades who hadn't made it home. "Why are you doing this again, Jack? Haven't you saved enough? Haven't you lost enough?" He ignored the voice. When they reached the cabin, Jack's legs felt carved from stone. He kicked the door shut behind him and lowered Emma onto the bearskin rug before the fire. Her breathing was shallow, erratic. He stripped off her wet coat and boots, working fast, wrapping her in blankets. Ranger lay beside her, his massive body radiating warmth. The dog's eyes never left her face. "Good boy," Jack whispered. He moved to the stove, poured water into a pot, and grabbed his small first aid kit. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of memory. He'd done this before, in places where gunfire replaced wind, where men bled out beneath his hands. He'd sworn he was done patching people together just to watch them fade anyway. But when he looked at Emma, at the fragile rise and fall of her chest, he felt something crack open inside him. Hours passed. He fed the fire until the cabin glowed with gold and orange. The storm outside screamed, but inside there was only the steady hiss of burning wood. Slowly, color crept back into Emma's face. Her fingers twitched beneath the blanket. Jack leaned back, exhaustion pressing down like a weight. Ranger lifted his head, resting it on Jack's knee. For the first time in years, Jack felt something close to peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. He didn't know who Emma Carter was, or what had driven her through the storm. But one truth settled deep in his chest like an ember refusing to die. This wasn't coincidence. Fate had brought that wreck to his doorstep. And whatever hunted her, it had now found him too. Outside, the wind shifted, howling not in anger now, but in warning. The storm had not ended. It had only begun. When morning came, it brought no sunlight, only a pale gray wash that turned the world into a frozen painting. The storm had eased, but its aftermath was cruel. The cabin creaked under the weight of snow, and the woods stood silent, as if the wind had stolen even the breath of the trees. Jack Miller stirred from a light, uneasy sleep. His muscles ached from carrying the woman through the storm, but habit kept him alert. He reached for the rifle leaning by the wall, checked the window, and listened. Only the low crackle of fire and Ranger's slow breathing filled the room. On the rug near the hearth lay Emma Carter, wrapped in thick blankets. Her hair, now clean of ice and blood, was a soft amber color, tangled but beautiful against the wool. Her face, still pale, had regained some warmth. Jack knelt beside her and pressed 2 fingers to her wrist. The pulse was stronger now. He exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath without knowing it. "Morning, soldier," a hoarse whisper broke the quiet. Her eyes had opened, gray-blue, sharp, despite exhaustion. Jack's instinct kicked in. "Don't move too fast," he said softly. "You've been out for hours." Emma tried to sit up, grimacing as pain flickered across her features. "Where am I?" "My cabin," Jack replied, standing to pour hot water into a tin mug. "Montana backwoods. You crashed not far from here last night." He handed her the cup. Drink this. It'll help. She took a sip, hands trembling. You carried me out of that truck? Jack gave a single nod. You'd have frozen before dawn? Emma's gaze moved to Ranger, who was sitting by the door like a sentry. The dog's golden eyes studied her with cautious intelligence. He's yours? Ranger, Jack said. Army K-9, smarter than most people I've met. Ranger tilted his head, as if agreeing. Despite her fatigue, Emma smiled faintly. Thank you, she murmured to both of them. Jack shrugged off the gratitude, uneasy under it. You had some bad bruises and a concussion. Mind telling me how you ended up in a blizzard on a mountain road in the middle of the night? For a moment, Emma said nothing. Her eyes shifted toward the window, where the storm had left the glass glazed in frost. The silence grew heavy, filled with things unsaid. Finally, she drew a slow breath. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me, Jack replied, his tone calm but firm. Emma's voice was low but steady as she began. I'm a nurse, a combat medic actually. Served 2 tours in Syria with the National Guard. When I came home, I took a position at the Veterans Hospital in Clearwater County. That's where I met Sheriff Cole Davis. Jack's jaw tightened at the name. He'd heard it before. The sheriff of the entire Northern District, decorated, charismatic, often on the local news smiling beside senators. A man the public trusted. He started a relief program, Emma continued, her eyes darkening, to distribute medical supplies and painkillers to struggling veterans. At least, that's what it was supposed to be. But I began noticing discrepancies, supplies logged as delivered that never reached the patients, boxes of morphine missing, truck manifests that didn't match. When I checked deeper, I found that Davis was routing shipments to abandoned depots across the state line. Her voice trembled now, anger threading through fear. He's using the veteran program to smuggle opioids, hundreds of thousands of doses, and when I found the proof, I made the mistake of confronting him. Jack stared at her, silent. He could see the memory replaying in her eyes, the terror, the betrayal. He smiled, Emma said, her voice breaking, like it was a game. He said I'd been working too hard, that I was confused. Then 2 men showed up at my house that night. I ran, took the evidence, a flash drive, and tried to reach the FBI office in Missoula. But the roads were closing. His deputies caught up to me on the Ridge Road. They rammed my truck off the trail. Her words fell like stones. Jack absorbed them in silence. He knew that kind of evil, the kind that hid behind uniforms and badges, men who smiled for cameras but left others to die in the dark. What's on that drive? He asked finally. Everything. Shipping logs, payment records, encrypted messages between Davis and a cartel contact. If I can get it to the feds, they can take him down. Jack rubbed a hand over his beard, his thoughts measured. He had promised himself never to pick sides again, never to fight another man's war. But looking at Emma, pale and bruised, clutching that thin thread of justice, he knew neutrality wasn't an option. You need to rest, he said quietly. Then we'll figure out a way to get that evidence out of here. Emma met his eyes. Why help me, Jack? You don't even know me. He hesitated. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. Outside, Ranger growled, a low, warning rumble that made both of them look to the window. Jack moved quickly, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see the faint flash of light through the trees, brief, distant, then gone. Headlights. He turned to Emma. You said Davis sent people after you? Her face drained of color. Yes. He won't stop until I'm dead. Jack chambered a round into his rifle. Then he's going to have a harder time than he thinks. Ranger stood, fur bristling, ears forward. The sound of engines echoed faintly from the valley below, muffled by snow but closing in. Jack doused the lantern, plunging the cabin into shadows. Stay down, he whispered. The storm's over, but the real trouble's just starting. The sound came first, distant, mechanical, and wrong. Not the rumble of thunder or the moan of shifting ice, but the low, steady hum of engines crawling through the snow. Jack Miller froze mid-step, the coffee mug in his hand trembling slightly. Ranger, lying near the door, lifted his head, ears erect, body rigid. A single growl, deep and controlled, rolled from his chest. That was enough for Jack. He set the mug down, extinguished the lamp, and reached for his rifle. Through the frost-lined window, faint beams of light slashed across the trees, headlights moving slow and deliberate. He counted 3, maybe 4 vehicles. Snowmobiles. He muttered under his breath. So they found us. Behind him, Emma Carter sat up on the sofa, her eyes wide. She looked stronger now, though exhaustion clung to her face. Her hair was tied back hastily. A bruise shadowed her cheek. "Jack," she whispered, "it's them. He said he wouldn't stop." Jack gave her a calm soldier's look. "Stay here. Keep low. Don't make a sound unless I tell you." He moved with quiet efficiency, checking the rifle's bolt, pocketing extra rounds, and securing his knife to his belt. Ranger stood beside him, muscles coiled, tail low, ready. The first knock came 5 minutes later, polite, almost rehearsed. A man's voice shouted over the wind, steady but authoritative. "Sheriff's Department, we're conducting a search and rescue. Anybody inside need assistance?" Jack didn't answer. He knew the tone. It wasn't concern, it was control. The voice belonged to Sheriff Cole Davis himself. Through the window, Jack could see him now. A tall man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark parka with a sheriff's badge glinting faintly under the porch light. His beard was neat, his smile practiced. The kind of face people trusted until they saw the eyes. Cold gray, devoid of warmth. 2 other men flanked him, one heavy-set and bearded, the other younger, thin, with a restless way of scanning the tree line. Both carried rifles slung casually, but their fingers hovered too close to the triggers for a rescue mission. "Sir," Cole called again, louder this time. "We've got reports of a vehicle crash in this area. We're just checking on folks." Jack's jaw tightened. He spoke quietly to Emma. "They're armed, and they're not here to help you." Emma clutched the blanket to her chest. "What are you going to do? Make them believe no one's home long enough to send them back down that road, or long enough to flank them." He slipped toward the back door, moving like a shadow. Ranger followed, paused silent on the wooden floor. Outside, the cold hit like a hammer. Jack circled wide through the trees, using the storm's remains for cover. The snow muffled everything except his heartbeat. From the porch, Cole's voice changed. "Break it down." The heavy-set man stepped forward, lifting his boot, and the door burst inward with a crash. Ranger lunged from the shadows of the living room before the man could react. The German shepherd hit him square in the chest, teeth finding the thick fabric of his jacket. The man screamed, stumbling back into the snow. Cole's eyes narrowed. "So, someone is home." He raised his weapon, but a shot rang out before he could aim. The bullet struck the post beside him, wood splintering. Jack's voice carried through the storm. "Step away from my door, Sheriff," Cole smiled, a predator's grin. "Mr. Miller, I presume. I appreciate your hospitality. Why don't you come out so we can talk like civilized men?" Jack's silhouette appeared from behind a pine tree, rifle steady. "Civilized men don't send hit squads after nurses?" Cole's smile vanished. "You don't know what you're involved in." "I know enough." The younger man panicked first, firing blindly toward the trees. Jack dropped to one knee, exhaled, and returned a single precise shot that shattered the man's flashlight, plunging them back into darkness. The sudden confusion gave Ranger time to drag the wounded heavy-set man deeper into the snow, away from the door. Inside, Emma crouched behind the sofa, heart pounding, clutching the pistol Jack had given her. She could hear the muffled shouts, the crack of gunfire, and Ranger's snarling bark slicing through the night. Every instinct told her to hide, but she couldn't stand doing nothing. She grabbed a towel, ripped it into strips, and laid out the medical kit on the table. If Jack came back hurt, she'd be ready. Outside, Cole was retreating, firing 2 warning shots toward the cabin before motioning to his men. "Fall back," he barked. "We'll finish this another way." Their engines screamed to life, snowmobiles tearing back into the forest. The echo of their departure faded into the storm. Jack waited another full minute before lowering his weapon. His breath formed white clouds in the air, and the adrenaline slowly ebbed. "Ranger," he called softly. The dog appeared from behind the trees, muzzle flecked with snow, eyes bright and alert. Jack knelt, resting a hand on the dog's neck. "Good work, partner." When he finally stepped back inside, Emma was already waiting with gauze and antiseptic. "You're bleeding," she said, pointing to a tear along his shoulder. Just a graze, he muttered, wincing as she cleaned the wound. The scent of antiseptic mixed with wood smoke and the faint metallic tang of blood. Emma worked with quiet focus, her hands steady. "You could have been killed," she whispered. He looked at her, voice low. "So could you." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hiss of the fire. For the first time since the war, Jack felt the ice around his chest begin to thaw. Emma's eyes met his, tired, scared, but alive. They didn't need words in that fragile stillness. Something unspoken passed between them, something human and warm in a world gone cold. Ranger, sensing the quiet, lay down beside the hearth, tail thumping once before curling up. The wind outside had softened to a whisper, but Jack knew it wasn't over. The sheriff would return, next time, not to talk. He looked at the fire, its glow painting the cabin in amber light. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was protecting someone worth dying for. And that, he thought, might be enough. Snow fell again that night, thick and soundless, as if the world itself wanted to bury the violence of what had just happened. The air in the cabin was heavy with the scent of gunpowder and wood smoke. Jack Miller sat at the small table, the lamplight carving deep lines into his face. His shoulder throbbed beneath a hastily wrapped bandage, but he ignored it, his mind already moving 3 steps ahead. Ranger slept at his feet, breathing slow but alert enough that one wrong sound would bring him to his paws in an instant. Across from him, Emma Carter stared into the fire, her expression torn between exhaustion and fear. "They'll be back," she said finally, her voice low. "Cole doesn't quit. He'll bring more men next time." Jack nodded. "I know, which is why we can't wait." He reached under the table, pulling out a worn metal case, a relic from his service years. Inside lay a satellite communicator, dusty but functional. "I can get a message out, but we need someone we can trust." Emma frowned. "Who would that be?" Jack hesitated. The name felt like pulling open an old wound. "Mark Hanley," he said. "We served together. He's with the Federal Bureau now, Oversight Division. We were the only 2 left from our recon team." He powered the device on, static humming faintly through the cabin. Emma watched him carefully. "What kind of man is he?" Jack's lips curved into a tired half-smile. "The kind who believes in rules, even when it costs him. He got burned a few years back after exposing a weapons deal gone bad inside his own unit. Lost his family, his badge for a while. They reinstated him when they realized he was right. He's stubborn as hell, but he's clean." The communicator blinked to life. Jack typed quickly, sending coded coordinates and a short message. "High-value witness. Evidence on federal corruption. Hostile law enforcement presence. Request immediate extraction." He signed it with a single word, Wolf. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Wolf? Old call sign," he said simply. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind had softened to a steady moan. The silence felt too calm, too still, like the world holding its breath before the next storm. Emma leaned forward, eyes reflecting the firelight. "You really think your friend will come?" "He'll come," Jack said, though part of him didn't fully believe it. "But until he does, we hold." The hold didn't last long. It began with a faint tremor, a deep vibration that rippled through the frozen ground. Ranger's head shot up, ears forward. Then came the sound of rotors, not one, but several. Jack moved to the window, lifting the curtain just enough to glimpse the flashing red lights cutting through the snow. "He's bringing a helicopter," Jack muttered. "That's not rescue. That's assault." Emma's face paled. "Cole?" "Cole," Jack confirmed. "And he's got backup." Moments later, floodlights swept across the trees, turning night into blinding white. Amplified voices barked through megaphones. "This is Sheriff Cole Davis. Jack Miller. You are harboring a fugitive and interfering in an ongoing federal investigation. Surrender immediately." Jack's laugh was short and bitter. "He's staging it, making it look official." Ranger growled, his fur bristling. Jack crouched beside him, scratching the dog's neck. "You ready, buddy?" The dog's tail flicked once, a silent yes. Jack moved fast, pulling Emma toward the trap door beneath the rug. "Down there," he ordered. "You and the evidence. If this goes bad, you run." "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice shaking but firm. He looked at her, something unspoken passing in the space between them. "You're not the first person I've tried to save," he said quietly, "but you might be the first I actually can." Before she could answer, gunfire shattered the windows. Bullets tore through the walls, splinters flying like shrapnel. Ranger lunged toward the door, barking fiercely. Jack rolled behind the overturned table, returning fire in controlled bursts. "Go, Emma!" he shouted. She hesitated for 1 second too long, long enough to see Cole himself stepping into the clearing, his parka gleaming under the lights. He held an assault rifle, his calm expression framed by the swirling snow. He looked almost noble in the chaos, like a general in a war he'd already won. "Jack," he called, "you're making a mistake. The woman you're protecting is a traitor. You're obstructing justice." Jack's voice cut through the storm. "Justice doesn't wear your badge anymore." He fired again, hitting the engine block of a nearby snow vehicle. It exploded into a cloud of flame and steam. Inside the chaos, Emma dove for the trap door, clutching the flash drive tight. She slid into the darkness, pulling it closed behind her. Ranger joined Jack, staying low, guarding his flank. The fight was brutal. Bullets, fire, and snow merging into one deafening blur. Just when Jack's ammunition began to run low, a new sound rose above the storm, the deep, rhythmic chop of another helicopter, this one darker, heavier. Spotlights cut through the haze, illuminating the sheriff's men. A mechanical voice boomed over loudspeakers. "Federal Task Force! Drop your weapons and stand down!" Cole turned, confusion twisting across his face. "No, you can't—" He never finished. Rangers of another kind, federal agents in snow-white tactical gear, descended like ghosts, surrounding the clearing in seconds. Jack lowered his weapon slowly, relief washing through him. A tall man stepped out from the lead chopper, snow swirling around his boots. He was in his late 40s, clean-shaven, with the sharp, steady eyes of someone who had seen too much but refused to look away. "You always did pick the worst places for reunions, Wolf," he said. Jack smiled faintly. "Good to see you too, Mark." By dawn, Cole Davis was in cuffs, his operation dismantled. The evidence Emma carried was secured, and the story would soon spread far beyond the frozen hills. For now, though, Jack just stood in the quiet aftermath, watching the first light of morning burn through the storm clouds, a faint, stubborn promise of peace. Spring crept back into the valley like a slow breath after a long-held silence. The snow melted in thin ribbons along the ridges, revealing dark soil and stubborn shoots of green pushing through. The river, once locked under ice, now murmured freely again, carrying pieces of winter downstream. The mountains, washed in gold by the rising sun, seemed softer somehow, less cruel, more forgiving. Jack Miller stood on the porch of his cabin, hammer in hand, the scent of pine and damp earth filling the air. He was rebuilding the railing that the storm and bullets had shattered months ago. His movements were steady, practiced, and quiet. The once bearded soldier now kept his face clean-shaven. Though the lines of hardship remained, his shoulders had lost some of their old rigidity. His eyes, once guarded, carried a calm strength. A man learning at last to live without waiting for the next fight. Ranger lay in the patch of sunlight by the steps, his coat sleek and healthy, muzzle touched with gray. He watched his owner with half-lidded eyes, tail thumping lazily against the wood. Though age had softened his energy, the dog's alert gaze remained sharp, a sentinel at peace. The world had changed since that night. Sheriff Cole Davis's trial had made national headlines. The evidence Emma Carter had carried exposed a network of corruption that reached from rural police departments to state suppliers. Cole's face, once the symbol of authority, now looked hollow under courtroom lights. Justice, it seemed, had found its way through the snow. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and looked toward the tree line, where the first wildflowers were breaking through frost. For the first time in years, he was thinking about staying. He'd repaired the roof, rebuilt the shed, even dug out a small garden patch near the porch. It wasn't much, but it was his. The sound of an engine reached him, soft at first, then clearer as it wound along the gravel road. Ranger perked up, head tilting, ears twitching. Jack smiled faintly. "Go on," he said. "I think you know who that is." The old pickup truck came into view, red dust coating its sides. When it stopped near the cabin, Emma Carter stepped out, wearing the dark navy uniform of a regional EMT. She looked different, stronger, surer. Her once pale face now glowed with sun and health, her hair tied back neatly, a badge glinting on her chest. Her boots crunched against the gravel as she walked toward him, and Ranger bounded down the steps, barking with joy. Emma laughed, kneeling to hug the dog. "Hey, Ranger," she said, ruffling his ears. "Still watching over him, huh?" Ranger gave a low bark, tail wagging furiously. Jack leaned against the porch post, watching the reunion with quiet amusement. "He hasn't stopped since you left," he said. Emma straightened, pulling a white envelope from her jacket. "I brought you something," she said, handing it to him. Jack took it, the government seal catching the light. He opened it carefully. Inside was an official letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs. He read silently, his expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, the corners of his mouth lifted. "You've been reinstated," Emma said softly. "They cleared your record. They're offering you a new position, training rescue dogs for the military's disaster response division." Jack's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Didn't think they'd ever call me back." "They said your friend Mark recommended you personally," she added. "He said they needed someone who understood both war and mercy." Jack folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket. For a long moment, he looked out at the mountains, their peaks glowing orange in the early light. "Maybe it's time," he said finally. "Time to teach instead of fight." Emma smiled, her eyes softening. "You'd be good at it." "Maybe," he said, chuckling, "if the dogs don't outsmart me first." They both laughed, and the sound carried through the quiet valley like something the mountains themselves had been waiting to hear. Ranger trotted up the steps and sat between them, pressing his head against Jack's leg. The dog looked out at the sun rising above the ridges, tail swaying gently. Emma followed his gaze. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Jack shook his head. "Not anymore. This cabin saw the worst and the best of me. It's home now." Emma looked at him, her eyes reflecting both understanding and affection. "Then maybe it's my turn to stay a while," she said. Jack met her eyes and didn't look away. For a long moment, there was no need for words. The air was crisp, alive with birdsong. The fire of dawn stretched across the valley, painting everything in gold. He reached down, scratching Ranger's neck. "We've come a long way, haven't we, boy?" Ranger gave a contented huff, leaning into his hand. Jack turned to Emma, smiling softly. "You too, nurse. Looks like the storm's finally over." She smiled back. "No, Jack," she said. "It just became something beautiful." Together, they stood on the porch, side by side, the soldier, the healer, and the loyal dog, watching the light climb higher over the mountains. The cabin glowed behind them, smoke curling lazily from the chimney, as if even the house itself was breathing again. The past was still there, written in scars and memory, but it no longer defined them. It was simply the road that led here, to this quiet, golden morning where life began again. Sometimes life's greatest battles aren't fought with bullets or strength, but with faith, faith that light still waits beyond the storm. Jack's cabin, once a place of silence and sorrow, became a home again because he chose compassion over fear. Emma found courage not in running, but in healing, and Ranger, loyal, steadfast, pure of heart, reminded them both that even in the coldest night, love never freezes. Maybe that's the miracle we all search for, not the kind that splits the sky with thunder, but the quiet one that whispers, "You're not alone," because every storm, no matter how dark, will one day break before the dawn. If you believe that God still sends light to guide those lost in the snow, if you believe that grace can find us even in our lowest valleys, then this story is for you. May the Lord bless and protect everyone who watches this. May He be your shelter when the world grows cold, your strength when you feel small, and your guide when the path disappears beneath your feet. If this story touched your heart, please help us share it. Click, like, leave a comment with the word Amen, and subscribe so you never miss another story of courage, hope, and divine mercy. Because sometimes your small act of sharing is the very light someone else needs to find their way home.